It shouldn't surprise anybody to tell you that Doug Christie is a defensive-minded head coach. But wait a minute, wasn't Mike Brown, Doug's predecessor, also a defensive-minded head coach? Look where that got him. What are the differences between Mike Brown's defensive approach and Doug Christie's defensive approach here in Sacramento? Well, to help us answer that question, Brenden Nunes from SacTown Sports 1140 joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all preseason and soon to be all regular season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And all this past week, I've been telling you about the great stuff that I've been seeing from Sacramento Kings training camp, the buy-in into Doug Christie and Scott Perry's vision for this organization going forward. I share with you, I thought as good of a first week of training camp could go, given the circumstances. It went really, really well. But Doug Christie is all about defense. And Mike Brown, after the amazing offensive year that the Sacramento Kings had, that Beam Team 1 year where they had the best offense in NBA history and they ended the playoff drought and lost to the Warriors in 7 games in the first round of the playoffs. From that point on, Mike Brown was very defense first. We have to improve defensively or we're not going to go anywhere. And it led to his and the front offices and the entire organization's downfall back into mediocrity. So with Doug Christie being a defensive-minded coach after failed years of Mike Brown trying to make the Kings into a more defensive-first team, how is this going to be any different? How is Doug Christie going to be the one to figure it out? Well, to help kind of unpack why we feel things are different or what about Doug is specifically different from Mike in his approach and his messaging that might actually get the results that Mike was not able to get, Brenden Nunes from SacTown Sports 1140 does a phenomenal job covering the Kings over there. Plus, he hosts the fantastic Kings Pulse podcast. He joins me right now to unpack that. I've gotten the question a lot over the last couple weeks. Mike Brown was a defensive coach. Doug Christie's a defensive coach. So why would this be any different? In fact, you could make the argument that Mike Brown had more of a defensive roster with De'Aaron Fox than Doug Christie does with Zach LaVine. But as my guest here, Brenden Nunes, can attest, as can I, from being in training camp over the last week, it seems different. It feels different. I don't know if it's simply the buy-in, but Brenden, if you were to not necessarily sell anybody, but explain to somebody why Doug Christie can be different than Mike Brown and have different success establishing a defensive identity here in Sacramento than Mike Brown did with this roster. Like, how would you explain that or try and sell that?
Yeah, honestly, it's not very easy, Matt. Like you mentioned, I think that Mike very much was a defensive guy. And the big difference to me here is that there is some sort of just connection between Scott Perry and Doug Christie, right? They are pushing in the same direction. I'm sure that you've talked about this. I've heard you talk about this actually, that Mike Brown and Monty McNair, it was Monty going up there and being like, hey, we just have to be good enough defensively. And Mike Brown being like, listen, I'm starting KZ Okpala and Mo Harkless because we need to play defense. So I do think there is a little bit of a difference here. And you said it, the best word is really buy-in. All these guys are buying into it. I think also Doug being a former coach, we've heard Drew Eubanks, for whatever that may be worth, talk about how much he benefits from playing for a former coach. And we've heard other guys echo that same sentiment. So I think Doug really wearing just how much Sacramento matters to him. And I think this team is going to wear that same thing, and having that perspective of a former player just seems to hold a little bit more weight here. But everybody's pushing in the same direction. And I think that's the greatest part about what we've seen from training camp so far.
Yeah, newsflash, I was a huge fan of Mike Brown. People may not know that.
Same.
Definitely not from my crash out when Mike was fired in December. Very active crash out that I had on
Hey, you were
social
not
media.
the only one that crashed out,
Man.
if you couldn't
Um,
tell.
but one area, and I think that Mike has been unfairly blamed for a lot of things, but that's the past. He's with the New York Knicks now. He's the enemy. But one thing that I felt that Mike didn't do well enough is make the best you. Well, he did this in his first year, but from that point, maximize the talent of his roster. And I felt that that's what Doug Christie did extremely well when he took over this sinking ship in the middle of last season with all this chaos going on. Is it seems like to some capacity, not to 100%, but to some capacity, he got this team to refocus in and lean into it's not what we can't do, it's what we can do and what we do really, really well. And that's what I thought his approach was going to be to training camp this year. And I've been surprised that it's been like, no, we are going to score. We are going to play fast. We believe we can play that way. But no, we're going to defend 94 feet. We're going to Doug has made it known, and by extension, Scott Perry has made it known what the non-negotiables are with this team going forward. And while there are players that I think it complements perfectly, like a Keegan Murray, like a Keon Ellis, like even a Devin Carter to some extent, you look at DeMar DeRozan, you look at Zach LaVine, and you're like, these guys are extremely good at what they do. But defending 94 feet is not what they do. So I'm very curious to see how if Doug's messaging changes or how Doug holds to those non-negotiables when we actually get to NBA games and the strengths of a veteran-laden roster versus the obvious weaknesses.
Yeah, I think Doug joked about it a little bit on, I believe it was yesterday when we were there, that there was a clip that he was watching back of DeMar picking up 94 feet, and he's talking about how everybody was kind of laughing at it, which is clearly pointing at, like, this is not really a DeMar thing, to be honest, but everybody is embracing it. And I don't know how much we're going to see that during the regular season, right? Like, there's no reason, to be honest, for DeMar to be picking up 94 feet in the regular season, right? You're not putting him on one of the better players defensively when it comes to his assignment. And so that guy's not bringing the ball up the floor, right? DeMar is already gets to be down the floor. You'd imagine that Zach and some of these other guys are going to be in the same thing. But hey, if it calls for it, other guys are setting the tone, and it sounds like very much DeMar is playing into that. Zach is playing into that. Domas, go down the line, right? And you know as well as I, like, they're hyping up Dennis Schroeder like he's the next greatest thing. Like, he very much is playing into that. And I think that's why there is so much excitement about Dennis Schroeder, that he plays into that identity that they have. That is the key word for sure going into this season, right? Sustainable success, and that we want to build and create an identity for what it means to be a Sacramento Kings player. We're going to have to see how that plays out, but we'll see how it goes.
The 94th feet thing specifically, we've heard everybody talk about it at camp, but that doesn't mean everybody has to do it, right? That's a large, this is what Keon Ellis is supposed to do. This is what Devin Carter is supposed to do. If Keegan Murray's guarding the ball handler, I guess he's supposed to do it. Although Keegan's even said, hey man, Dennis Schroeder is taking some of that responsibility off me. I'm happy about that. But what Doug said is is Zach going to guard 94 feet? No, but he better be there at 70. Meaning if Keon is giving his all, let's say, to make sure the point guard is having a tough time just bringing the ball up the floor, you better not allow a wing or Zach LaVine's man or DeMar DeRozan's man or anybody's man can't be wide open at half court for an easy escape pass to, and then you just settle in. You have to, if my player is going to be given, my teammate's going to be given their all to harass the ball handler, I have to make sure the passing lane's not open for him to have a clean bailout. And I don't know about you, Brennan, the two glimpses that we got of 5-on-5 on, what was it, Thursday and Friday, in both of those 5-on-5s, I don't want to read too far into it because it's just a small glimpse, but in both of those 5-on-5s, we watched Zach LaVine get steals. One was on ball against Devin Carter. The other one was he intercepted a pass that was supposed to be a kick out for a straightaway three. And then he also deflected a pass that it looked like he left his man wide open in the corner, but got his hand up enough to deflect and disrupt the pass so there wouldn't be an open shot. That to me is encouraging. It's showing that, okay, Zach, you don't have to be a lockdown defender, but you can do that. And even Malik Monk, there was a moment where Malik Monk was defending DeMar DeRozan in the post. Did Malik Monk stop DeMar DeRozan as he expected to? No, but he poked the ball away from DeMar enough to disrupt DeMar, so DeMar had to pass the ball and get rid of it and couldn't get to his shot. Like, those little things, like, Doug can expect that. Doug can demand that from this group, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the disruptive word that you used is the right way to go about this, right? Zach had 3 years in Chicago where he averaged more than 1 assist a game. Like, I think the idea and the team that I keep thinking of is early Chris Finch, Minnesota Timberwolves, right? They were not very good defensively, and this Kings team was 22nd last year defensively. Like, don't get it twisted. They are not a good defensive team when it comes to their personnel, right? But the idea is that, hey, we still have to be capable in this aspect. We have to check the boxes that are necessary. And it sounds like they're really just trying to muck up the game. And I do think we're at the point where Zach LaVine is kind of underrated as a player. Don't get me wrong. I do very much think he is probably overpaid. He's $48 million this next season. Like, I don't think that's really debatable, but I think lost in all of that is that this guy averages 22 a game and he is willing to embrace all of these things on both sides of the ball. That doesn't mean he's a great defender. He said it himself, like, I'm not going to be Kawhi Leonard overnight, right? He said that whenever we talked to him over here at training camp, but that doesn't mean that he can't embrace what he can do and try to buy into this defensive mentality that they have. Now, again, 22nd in defense last year. I don't think this is all of a sudden going to be a top 10 defensive team, but buy-in and commitment to that end, having a little bit of just kind of pride, really, more than anything, right? I think does play into that you need to not just be willing to get blown by and having a care for, hey, Dennis is working his butt off at the point of attack. And like you said, I'm not just going to let my guy make it easy for him after all the work that Dennis just did setting the tone, right? So I do think Zach is buying into that. I think DeMar's buying into that, Domas, all of the above, right? You can go down the line. And that does feel like one of the big differences with Doug here is that they're embracing it. It's the same messaging, to your point, as you mentioned earlier, that we did hear from Mike Brown, but it is definitely encouraging to hear everybody talk about being on the same page and buying into this consistent messaging that they're hearing from Scott and Doug.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet. This thing is crazy. It's designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running or lifting or cross training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach that hard-to-reach peak performance. I love how Peloton IQ systems offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights for you, corrects your form, makes every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat, and the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. What about the mindset, though? Like, Doug Christie's mindset, we've heard him say over the 9 to 12 months, almost 12 months that he's been the head coach, or soon to be 12 months. Like, we're gonna hit them in the mouth. We're gonna make sure they feel us, right? We're gonna be kind of all up in this. Just a very, I don't know if like Ime Udoka-esque mindset is a good example, but something that you can draw on from like how the Houston Rockets were last year. Like, they took it personally if you scored on them. They made it their mission to make you uncomfortable. Can we see Zach LaVine? Can we imagine DeMar DeRozan embodying that mindset? They're so incredibly skilled and talented on the offensive end and are going to be needed on that end, of course. But should I expect to see Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan getting in somebody's face and playing physical, if nothing else, on the defensive end?
I kind of think the answer is that they've never enjoyed being scored on in their entire career, right? And so what we've seen up to this point, I don't know how much we can expect more from them defensively and what they are capable of. But again, I mean, I think the buy-in does matter here, right? And there's a belief with this team, which I think is very key with any NBA team. Like, they look around the locker room, and as much as well, I don't want to say I'll speak for myself. I think this team is going to be fairly mediocre. Like, they can look around the room and be like, hey, DeMar DeRozan is top 30 all time in NBA scoring. Zach LaVine is a ridiculous scorer. He's putting up 20 plus a night. Dennis Schroeder, they know what he brings to this team, right? Domantas Sabonis, a multiple time All-Star, All-NBA player. Like, I don't think it's hard for these guys to look around and be like, hey, we have something here, right? As long as we can piece together defensively, just to be capable with this group. And I do think they are buying into that. So, long way of answering your question. I don't think that we're going to see Zach and DeMar be like better defenders than they have ever been in their career, right? But I do think that there will be a sense of buy-in here. And that's what everybody is pitching. That's what the sell is right now. And I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. Like, I'm believing right now. I think it could change very quickly. And, it's another question that ask me again a month into the season, and we'll see how we feel. We know they don't have an easy start to their schedule, but again, I mean, that buy-in is key to teams, right? You hear teams talk about like belief being the main thing, and the Detroit team that won the championship that Scott Perry was part of that front office, I think is the definition of an outlier, right? But if you look at the core of that team, it was that they really believed that they could do it. And honestly, nobody else did. And I think that's the vibe that we're getting with this Kings team right now.
I might ask you again on Thursday morning, because we'll get our first glimpse of the Kings in action on Wednesday against the Toronto Raptors. It's preseason. Both teams, including the Raptors, of course, are going to be experimenting on a lot of things. I'm also, Brenden, expecting things to be very sloppy because of how fast the Kings are trying to play. Like, it's very clear pace has been an emphasis during this preseason to this point, or excuse me, the training camp to this point. But is there anything in particular that you are looking for, or like, I'm going into the Golden One Center on Friday night to either have, or Wednesday night to either have this question answered or to some extent addressed more than what we could get context wise in training camp?
I think what picking up 94 feet and everybody doing that really means, right? Like, we're talking about the idea of, like you mentioned, Zach, hey, maybe that means 70 feet for you, right? And I think it's point guard specific, picking up 94 feet more than likely. So I'm a little curious to see what that looks like. But I'm also a little locked into sort of the individual growth that could take place with this team. And now they're a little bit older, so there's not the greatest amount of aspects to really look for that. But Domas has talked about how his shot is quicker, right? And he shot a career high last year, above 40% from three, but he only shot 2 a game. And he's like, hey, I'm going to take more this year. I am planning on being on the 3-point line. And this is implemented from Doug, obviously, that the big is trying to defend the rim. So if I'm out on the perimeter, that obviously helps with the rim protection. So I'm watching that. I am watching Keegan Murray talking about getting a little bit more creative this offseason and what that may look like. He says that essentially that, he has no more handcuffs on him. He's allowed to do whatever he wants out there. I'm curious to see what that really looks like, because these scrimmages, honestly, I'm like, hey, Keegan's not really touching the ball that much. But again, we are seeing the last few moments of these practices, so it's hard to really see all that. And the other individual growth aspect I would say that I'm really keeping tabs on is Keon Ellis. He's very aware that the star player is probably going to be guarding me. And I can't just let him have a play off. I need to be able to put the ball on the deck a little bit and make a play from there. So I personally am watching a little bit for these individual growths and obviously how that would work towards the team goal.
Training camp is interesting too, because you can only go against each other. So I've paid very close attention, as you know, to the units and the groups and what color jerseys each group's wearing. And the starters are as established as it gets. So no surprises there, but we've seen some questions of who's going to be the backup front court. And we've seen Dario Saric and Drew Eubanks getting that opportunity, it seems like, early on. But it's not just the units, it's who does Doug experiment with, like interchanging each other? Like, I think we both know that Malik Monk is going to play with the starters at some point. Keon Ellis will play with the starters at some point. What does Neat Clifford look like? Not against Zach LaVine, but next to him, or not against DeMar DeRozan, but next to him. What is Maxime? Do we get a glimpse of Sabonis and Renault on the floor together at the same time with Renault's spacing? And does it work or does it not? So does it make a future Twin Towers potential there, or is it not there? Right. So I'm very curious about how Doug Christie interchanges his lineups a little bit, and he has his first opportunity to experiment with that on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think the backup point and the backup 4 spot are really the positions where I'm like, hey, I don't even know what to expect right now. That's another thing that I'm definitely keeping tabs on of, Malik Monk has talked about very bluntly at the end of last season that he felt most comfortable at that starting 2 spot. I think that we both expect he's not going to be in that starting 2 spot, but if he's an early sub, he essentially can function as that same role, right? And move into that. But they also need him to play a little bit of backup point guard. So who's going to be the first sub here, right? I think it's easy at this time of year to be thinking about it in like hockey sub rotations, but there's going to be more staggering, right? And they, to your point, haven't really gotten to experience that much throughout this point of training camp because they're running different units. But I think that Malik can sub into that starting spot and function in that role a little bit. That doesn't mean you're not going to also be a little bit of a backup point guard. Maybe that also means that you're subbing in for DeMar early, and DeMar is kind of your backup 4. Like, in my mind, that makes a lot of sense of a way to go about it. I know that I always mention him guarding Aaron Gordon, and that didn't always go the greatest way, but DeMar doesn't have the greatest foot speed at this point in his career, and I think him guarding bigger players makes a little bit of sense. Maybe that is your answer at the backup 4 rather than a Dario Saric or I personally am not really buying Drew Eubanks, Maxime Renault playing alongside Domantas Sabonis. It feels very much like a Rashawn Holmes being like, hey, no, I was told I was going to play alongside Domas. And I'm like, I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to that. I think there are positional or situational moments where you're playing against Cleveland or Minnesota, and it makes a lot of sense to go in that direction. Milwaukee, maybe, but I think for the most part, I'll believe it when I see it more so with that. But I do think there are a lot of rotational questions to your point of specifically that backup point guard and that backup power forward. And the answer might be more simple than I think people are making it a little bit. It might be just that Malik Monk subs in pretty early and he also plays your backup point guard. It might mean that one of your starters is kind of the backup point guard as well, just depending on how some of this staggering goes. So I think Doug has a lot of playing with this and finagling he can do to see how these lineups may be optimized.
Like I said at the top of the show, this episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel has so many ways for you to play. It's perfect for however you want to approach it, whether you're a psychopath like my buddy Alan Stiles from SacTown Sports 1140 on the midday shows. He loves his parlays. He loves to build 5, 6, 7, 8 leg parlays that are absolutely insane, but if they hit, you get big paydays. Or you can try player prop bets. You can even follow live betting lines during games that are you're watching or that are happening right in front of you. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or you're a nerd like me that loves diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. We've heard discussed too, Domantas Sabonis going to be used differently in the offense, and he's being used differently, less on the dunker spot. And to me, what it sounds like is, okay, Domantas Sabonis is being used the same way he was being Team 1. Like, he's out on the perimeter a lot of DHOs, a lot of playmaking out there, which I like. It opens up his game a lot. I still want him around the rim at times because he's so physical, and he should be able to get 6 to 8 points a game just simply with putback opportunities or around the rim, as long as he doesn't miss a bunch of bunnies like it seemed like he did last season. But how much do you buy Dennis Schroeder's out of the game, Malik Monk comes in, let's say. Malik is handling the ball and bringing the ball up the floor. but Domas is the one that's facilitating. So while he's not the backup point guard, he's the one that you're primarily going to play through when Dennis is getting a little bit of a breather.
Yeah, I think that's how this is going to go. I think that DeMar and Zach fall into that too. Malik can definitely fall into that. But like the idea of, I almost feel like the point guard role that we're talking about is literally just who is dribbling the ball down the floor and getting the ball to Domantas Sabonis, right? Like you're not really running the offense, right? Like Keon, when you talk about, hey, I worked on putting the ball on the deck a little bit more this offseason, we really just need you to bring the ball up the floor and get it to Domas. And then from there, all your actions are pretty much the same as what they would be if you were slotted into that starting lineup, right? So I do think that is what we're working towards here, that it's not as black and white as, hey, this is the starting group and this is the bench group. Like it's not hockey subs, right, that we fall into this time of year. And it's probably going to be, you can have DeMar ran point guard and very much became a point guard in San Antonio. Like as much as he has this ball stopper stigma to him, he's not that. Like he is very much willing to move the ball. And I think he could function as that in the second unit. Domas can do that. Zach is more of like a score first guy, but he can be your primary playmaker when it comes to just running that second unit. So I agree with you. I think that very much so it is going to be just about a kind of who can just inbound the ball, bring it down the floor, get it into the hands of Domas, or maybe it's just DeMar that is the one doing that. And that is maybe your solution to this backup point guard flux that we're kind of in with that second unit.
Where are you at with Devin Carter? It seems like he's been impressive at training camp so far. Doug Christie says he's in way better shape. Of course, this is his first actual training camp because he was hurt last year during his rookie season. Carter is fighting an uphill battle, and I think I illustrated it on the King's Pulse podcast when I was with you and Chris recently. But if Doug wants a 10-man rotation, it feels like Devin Carter is 11. Like he's the first guy out, but also the first guy that will get his number called if Doug needs to go one step further, or with whether it's injury or fatigue or whatever, knock on wood. I mean, Devin Carter has to stay ready because he's going to get his opportunity. And on paper, just like last season, there are things that Devin Carter does naturally that seem like they would fit great into what the Kings are trying to do. But the game's not played on paper. So where has Devin Carter changed your mind at all? Any kind of different feeling about him based off of what we've seen and heard from training camp?
Yeah, it's hard to say that he's changed my mind up to this point. For what it's worth, I was a very much Devin Carter believer. I actually remember being at the draft with you. Yeah, and I'm like, hey, this guy, I think that he's something. But I also viewed him more as a combo guard, right? And a guy that could play off the ball alongside De'Aaron Fox, for example, at the time of the draft. And so I'm not really sure about this point guard thing, but again, maybe that just means bringing the ball down the floor and getting it to DeMar or Domas. And I think that Devin could very much play into that. But his strength really is defense. And that is what they are pushing nonstop, as we started at the top of this show, right? And if you're talking about, hey, Dennis is going to be an amazing addition to this piece because he's going to set the tone defensively, Devin is a better defender than Dennis, to be honest. And Devin does need to piece together some of his offensive game in order to warrant minutes consistently, that I would say that, you have to not be ignored offensively, to be honest. And right now the shot looks a little bit tough at times, and I don't really care about the form, whatever it may be. If it goes in, it goes in, right? Sean Marion made a living off this crap. And so I think that he can still make a living off that. Everybody says that shot does still work, but I do still need to see it a little bit more when it comes to Devin. I think having health is just really the big thing here, right? And when we were out at Summer League, you could tell that shoulder was bothering him. He's had multiple shoulder injuries throughout the course of his career. It's part of the reason the Kings were even able to select him at where they did. And so I think the main thing for Devin is just, can you be healthy? And can you go out there and show what you're good at? Like, he has a 42-inch vertical, which is the same as Malik Monk for anybody that needs a little bit of point of reference there. It is absolutely ridiculous. He's got a good wingspan going on out there. The athleticism is ridiculously off the charts when it comes to Devin Carter. And I think that he plays basketball the right way. It's just, what is this fit going to look like? And that is one of the main things that I'm watching for here is Toronto comes into town for preseason and the rest of those games they got here.
We'll either leave the Golden One Center on Wednesday with a lot of answered questions or a lot more questions. It's going to be one of the two, it feels like. But to wrap this up, Brenden, like I was trying to explain to the listeners just about this week to kind of summarize it up. And while I still am very apprehensive about a lot of things with this roster and where this team is going, it's not like 1 week of training camp and players saying the right things have completely changed my mind on all the fears that I talked about significantly over the course of the summer. But as well as a first week of training camp can go without any measurable, like, measuring stick of a game against an opponent with a first-time head coach and Doug Christie, I think this first week of training camp went about as spotless as it could have gone.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I kind of had the perspective of, I was asking our buddy Chris Watkins, essentially, like, hey, this is how training camp goes. Like, everybody is buying in. And he had the great perspective of, well, Malik could have came into this pretty annoyed at how the offseason went, to be honest. And Domas could have done the same thing. Like, DeMar could have been pretty agitated about the way the things went last year. And he obviously was very blunt, and I appreciate the honesty about reflecting on last season, but he more so transferred into, hey, I'm excited about this year to essentially wipe away the bad taste that was last season. So I guess I'm with you. I am buying into a little bit of what they're selling here at training camp, and this is the time of year very much to do so. I think the good vibes that everybody's talking about and how much last year was a crap show, I'm paraphrasing DeMar's words there, that could all change mid-season, right? Like, I think the Kuminga stuff is going to linger again right when we hit mid-January. I think it wouldn't surprise me if DeMar, Zach, maybe Domas are like on the table mid-season, and that's where I'm more of like, hey, do the vibes all still feel good? Is everybody pushing in the same direction? I think that this is the time of year where it's easy to do that, but being aware of that, I still am buying it.
Repairing our hearts to be broken again. We can't help it. We can't help it.
We got to.
The Sacramento Kings way. Brenden Nunes, excellent job covering the Sacramento Kings and training camp all week long and for the rest of camp and season long over at SacTown Sports 1140 with the crew over there. Appreciate you making the time, my friend, and we'll do it again very, very soon. Hopefully, vibes are still high.